system, the new one, the pitch on this is significantly different. And also we now have a 1-inch CNC aluminum block wedged between the flywheel and the bearing assembly. So before in previous models, in the legacy model, you were able to over retract the actuator, and what would happen was you would slam the flywheel into the bearing assembly, pop the bearing out, push this pinch collar off, and you would have disengaged drive. So you'd have to put it all back together. Those of you who've done that, I want to get into it, that's on a different video. You can watch that. It's called disengaged drive on the ATF side. This one, what I want to go over is just how to rebuild this one if need be, if it overextended and the two worm gears have come apart, where you've got this worm gear came all the way out of this worm gear and you got to put them back together. One of the differences is on the system, you'll notice it's very easy to move. Okay, you still have your track in your smaller worm gear and your welded keyway in your larger worm gear, and if you look, they line up, the track with that keyway. So when you put them together and you line them up, your tendency is going to be to turn the two of them to put them together. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is you want to line your keyway up with your track and then turn your bearing assembly to pull the little worm gear down into the bigger one, okay? And you know you got it right because when you grab them and you try and turn, they don't turn, they're locked together, okay? So next step is going to be you have to get your nut here in the right position, and this is where the significant difference between the two units comes in. Generally, you would get your 1-inch measurement here on the old system by just turning this, getting your 1 inch, that's easy. Your other one, you would take this, which in the old one was a brass nut, this one is a black nut, and you would set this distance to 1.5 inches. Put everything back together and you'd wind up pretty close to 1 inch on the mid tube and 2 inches on the outer tube, and you're good to install it. The new system doesn't work that way. It's very, very specific, so what you want to do is you want to make sure that this is fully collapsed all the way down on top of there and it's at home really hard. Next, you want to line this hole up in the bearing assembly, okay? And if you look, you have a hole here in your nut. What this distance has to be is 1 3/8 to 1.5. It can't be more or less than that. So what we're going to do is, if you look, we're greater than that now. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn that nut one turn back to where it's lined up. You see that? It's a hair more than 1 3/8. That's perfect. If you look, if you take this and turn this one turn back, we're now a hair more than 2 3/8. The reason is on the old system, the legacy system, one turn was a 1/4 inch of travel. One turn on this system now is 1 inch of travel, okay? So it's very, very important that you get this hole lined up with this hole with the top collapsed all the way down, and then it has to be 1 3/8 to 1.5, okay? So let's say that you don't have that. Let's say this was off the bottom of it, okay? So this is what we call clocking the nut. What you can do is make sure this is all collapsed, make sure that that hole is there, and then just kind of draw a visual line down to the end and put your hole in the same place as it is on the other end. So we're at 12 o'clock on this end, and we're at 12 o'clock on this end. So a good place to start is you're going to put a little bit of pressure with the nut on here, and you're going to turn it back, and you'll feel it engaged. It's 1, so if you start turning, you're engaged. 2, so that's 2 threads. So now what we'll do is we went 2 threads backwards. Now, make sure we're collapsed, get our hole. You want to make sure you put the nut on correctly, not like I just did. As you can see, even the instructor can make mistakes. This is a little bit harder when you got grease on it. Okay. So if you look, I took that nut off and clocked it, and we're back exactly where we were before. So right there, you could put this together, you can put your actuator tubes back together, and you will wind up with 1 and 2 inches exactly on there. So what I want to demonstrate to you is, when we did that, we lined up this hole at 12 o'clock, this hole at 12 o'clock at this end, and we went backwards 2 threads and then threaded it on. That is a great starting point. Sometimes, depending on the situation or where the end of this is cut, that might not pan out. So let's just mess with it here. Okay, and disengaged. I'm going to go 1 thread forward. Okay. Okay, so right now we're collapsed up top. We're all the way down, right? Okay. We got our hole here, and we try and line our hole up here. Okay, you see how it doesn't line up? So what we have to do is we have to take our nut off. Here's what I was trying to show you. So now we've got it to where it's clocked wrong. So you see when our hole's lined up here, we have 1 inch. So we go 1 turn, now we're at 2 inches. So we can't wind up at 1 3/8 to 1 1/2 because of the way this is clocked on the threads. Please forgive the thunderstorm that's going on outside while we're filming this. But we figured communicating the information to you is more important. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our good rule of thumb. Go to 12 o'clock, both holes facing up. We're going to go 1 thread, 2 threads. Okay. Exactly where we need to be. Okay, hole, it's lined up with hole. Okay, so to sum everything up, when you get everything reassembled, you just want to make sure again that you've got your top collapsed all the way down. You've got your 1 3/8 to 1 1/2 with this dimension with your 2 holes lined up. Then go ahead and reassemble your actuator tubes back together like you would normally on the legacy system or this one. Put your collar back on the end, a little black collar. Put it all back together and you're done. Make sure that when you reassemble and hook it back up to the controller that you extend it a couple of inches, and then do a hard home reset so the controller is now communicated with the actuators, they're repaired, and you're all ready and done. That's all there is to it. If you have any more questions, please visit us at SureShade.com. Otherwise, have a good day.